I'm chatting with Professor Ian Plimer, man of many parts, some of them still working. Well, that's how I was told to introduce him. Thank you for chatting with me. Now, tell me, you're a climate refugee from Adelaide, come to the land of sunshine for some actual electricity. Why, why is electricity so expensive?
Well, it's a total stuff-up. And it's a stuff-up based on some fundamentals. Before we had the federal government put their beak into electricity, we had declining electricity costs in all states. That's because each state was responsible for their own electricity. And from 1955 until about 1998, electricity prices went down, states were competing for business, and the states controlled their own energy. Then the federal government came in and the prices started to go up. Then in 2005, solar and wind went into the grid and the prices took off. And here we are, and you couldn't make this up if you tried.
Let me bookmark you there. Why did the federal government come in? What were they trying to... There must have been a problem they were trying to solve.
There was no problem they were trying to solve. It's all about power. There was no problem. The electricity prices were low, there was plenty of electricity, and businesses were thriving. It was driven in many ways by the federal government starting to think that maybe there's a climate problem and maybe we should take control of this. But we had a situation of very cheap power for a long time. Now we have unreliable power and it's highly expensive, and it's all driven by a fundamental fallacy. And that fallacy is that the human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. Now that's never been shown. It's never been shown, and 3% of annual emissions globally are from humans. The rest mainly from the ocean, some from volcanoes, some from exhaling. So here we have a fallacy, and the fallacy is that no one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. And if that's the case, then all the emissions situations that have been put in place politically are based on a fallacy, and that's the case. So we've got wind generators which are meant to lower the amount of emissions. However, when you do the sums, the amount of energy and carbon dioxide emissions you use to make a wind generator is far more than it'll ever save, and you've still got to have a coal-fired power station ticking over, and they only produce electricity at a certain velocity. The rest of the time they have to be backed up. So the whole business is political interference by governments who are kowtowing to Greens, who really have absolutely no interest in people. The end result of this is fuel poverty. The end result of this is we have many households and many pensioners who can't afford electricity. Here we are, a country that exports masses of gas, huge amounts of coal and a lot of uranium in yellowcake, and we have energy insecurity. Here's a very wealthy country where pensioners can't afford to pay their electricity bill. Now, you couldn't make this up if you tried. Yet we've done it, and we've done it because the drongos in power have been trying to appease the Greens. Now, the Greens are anarchists at best, communists at worst, and we've been trying to appease people who've got no skin in the game, who've got no knowledge, and who do not care about the environment, and who do not care about people. If the Greens were concerned about the environment, they wouldn't have these bird and bat chomping turbines, spoiling wonderful scenery, producing an absolute mess when you need to dispose of turbine blades. You wouldn't have Greens supporting that at all, but because they think it's reducing emissions, then they support it. If you were a true environmentalist, you'd say, well, I am concerned about emissions, and the only emissions-free technology is nuclear. So we've got this ridiculous situation of a very wealthy country that's committing suicide.
And my understanding is that nuclear energy is a technology that is particularly suited to what Australia has to offer. Geologically stable, surrounded by water, and a plentiful native supply of uranium. I'm not sure if there's anything else we're missing that makes it a bad option for Australia.
No, we're missing nothing. And in this country, what we also have are small, isolated communities in mines, in towns, where you have diesel-generated power. a small modular nuclear reactor, and you can whack these on a B-double, take it out to a mine. When the mine finishes operations, you put it on the truck and take it somewhere else. And we are perfect for small modular reactors. Where is a better place than the Olympic Dam mine in South Australia to put a nuclear reactor? Where's a better place to put it? We've already got the high voltage lines. You generate enough power for the mine, and the excess power goes down the line into the grid. We have the South Australian government, in a cynical display, has physically destroyed a coal-fired power station simply because of ideology. That coal-fired power station was producing electricity cheaper than the current price in South Australia. South Australia is not good at winning many things, but they've won one thing. They've got the highest electricity prices in the world.
In the world?
In the world.
Why would you vote that government in
twice?
twice?
Well, the Liberals' policy is very little different. So here we have despair, yet South Australia has huge amounts of yellow cake.
The smack of the fact that both major parties have been held political hostage by the enviro-Nazis on the left, making all these hysterical claims about the environment, and a gullible electorate has believed them, and somehow there's votes and government in the power of believing this climate con.
There is. And I argued in my 2009 book, Heaven and Earth, that we will not get a change until it really hurts. Now, it's hurting now, but it's got to hurt a hell of a lot more before we'll get a change. And in my latest book, which is called Climate Delusion and the Great Electricity Rip-Off, and it only came out a couple of days ago, and you can't get it in bookshops yet. In Climate Delusion and the Great Electricity Rip-Off, I say, look, there's simple ways of cleaning this up. Cut all the subsidies. Why should we subsidise unreliable, expensive energy like wind and solar? Have the activists follow the same laws that company directors do. So if you're out in public telling porky pies as a company director, you go to jail. Why shouldn't an activist? Why shouldn't a unionist?
Yeah.
Why should we have foreign organisations fund our anti-development groups? And this is happening, especially in Queensland. Why should we have organisations like Greenpeace have a tax deductibility status, which you pay for, and a tax deductibility status to then bail out people and pay their costs in court when they have broken the law?
Yeah.
So we have to completely get rid of any subsidies. We've got to get rid of the must-take policies. We must stop funding climate institutes, which every university's got. We must actually have people act with a degree of probity. And the example I use is that we have the Bureau of Meteorology has got long-term temperature records of temperature declining. They homogenise those, so it now looks as if temperature's increasing. Now, imagine if you're a company director and say, oh God, we've had a shocking year, we've had a loss. Oh, let's homogenise our results. Let's convert this loss in our annual report into a profit. Now, that is fraud. But when it happens in science, it's regarded as progressive. So once the language has been captured using words like carbon pollution, emissions, denier, homogenisation, once the language has been captured, you know you're being conned and you know you're going to pay.
Yeah. Now tell me briefly about your book, How to Get Expelled. That's a great title.
I wrote a book in 2009 called Heaven and Earth, and the aim of that book was an encyclopedic treatise on all of the science about climate change, and showing that there's a huge body of science out there that says, look, what we're being fed is absolute codswallop. Now, I wrote that as a reference book, such as if people are having an argument, they can go and pull it out of the bookcase and find something. And that book was a very dense book. It was a book with a few thousand scientific references, and I thought, well, this book's not suitable for younger people. So I rewrote it in a book for children, which I called How to Get Expelled from School.
And you mean like teenagers?
Yeah, teenagers. And there were 101 questions there. Questions. I mean, if you want to get off early on a Friday afternoon, I give you the questions, so you get kicked out and you can go home. And these were questions which were unanswerable, and these were questions which a school teacher couldn't answer. Now, the Gillard government got a bit upset at this book, and they put up a website, cost them about $500,000 of your money, put up a website criticising this book and trying to answer the 101 questions. They couldn't answer them because many of the questions were deliberately constructed so you'd get kicked out of school. There was no answer for it. And in this latest book, my question is a really simple one. Only one question. This is the only question you should ask. Can you please show me that the human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming? That's never been shown. And just stick to that question. Don't argue, just ask questions. Don't try to argue facts, because we're in a world where truth tellers and people with facts are actually regarded as seditious. Just ask simple questions. So if someone makes a statement, say, oh, that's interesting, where's the evidence for that? Can you please show me where I can check the evidence? Yep. So don't argue, ask questions.
And don't accept Al Gore as a source.
Well, here's Al Gore, who's telling us that we should be putting less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and he flits around the world in a private jet. Here's Al Gore telling us that sea level is going to rise, and, like Tim Flannery, he's got a waterfront house. Now, is hypocrisy the word that comes to mind, perhaps?
Thank you very much for all your writing and all your resources that you make available for people, because I honestly believe the way to get smarter politicians is to get smarter voters.
Well, I argue that in the book. A good politician's a frightened politician. We are now paying high electricity. What are you going to do about it? Pester your pollies. Don't let them go. And I give you all the questions. Just look up cornwallcourt.com. That's my publisher in Brisbane, cornwallcourt.com. And there's a collection of my books here. I've written 5 books on climate. Then 2 of them would be very useful if you want to be a really argumentative person. And one of them is Not for Greens, and the other is the latest book on climate delusion and the great electricity rip-off.
Very good. And are you available on social media? Do you have Twitter or Facebook or YouTube?
I have Facebook, and I get thousands of contacts every day, SMS, Facebook, emails. I can't keep up. Excellent. So if you contact me and I don't answer you, don't get excited, I'm not dead. It's just that I don't have the time.
It's been great, Professor Ian Plimer.
Thank you.